This is apropos. Israel has received the remains of another hostage from Gaza. It comes after the largest functioning hospital in the Strip said that the bodies of 15 more Palestinians were returned from Israel. Meanwhile, the United Nations is warning that aid agencies are in a race against time to get food and other supplies into the Strip. According to the UN's World Food Programme, Israel continues to impede deliveries in spite of a month-long ceasefire. Many Gazans continue to suffer from acute hunger, as Monty Francis reports.
This soup kitchen in Han Yunis is the only source of food for thousands of displaced Gazans, including a father of 9 who is struggling to feed his family.
Life is difficult for us because we don't own anything and we don't have anything to buy food with. There is no work. Without the soup kitchens here, we couldn't have eaten.
A ceasefire between Israel and Hamas nearly a month ago was meant to make way for large waves of humanitarian aid. But officials with the UN's World Food Programme say although the amount of aid getting into the territory has increased since the fighting stopped, it's nowhere near what's needed.
Across the rest of Gaza, the quantity of food arriving is still insufficient. In 3.5 weeks since the ceasefire, WFP has brought 20,000 metric tons of food assistance. That's roughly half what we need to be able to meet the food needs of the people in Gaza.
Israel says it's fulfilling its obligations under the ceasefire agreement, but only 2 crossings into the enclave are open, limiting the amount of aid trucks that can enter Gaza. As a result, soup kitchens are the only lifeline for many families.
Every day I come to the soup kitchen here to be able to provide food for my children, because as you can see, they say there's a truce, but it is a sham truce because the siege is still in place. Flour is still expensive, and things are just too expensive for us.
Almost all of Gaza's population of 2.3 million has been displaced by the war, and many have lost their homes in Israeli airstrikes. Humanitarian groups worry the crisis could worsen with winter approaching.
Let's bring in Aaron David Miller. He's a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He joins us now. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us on the program. We're hearing so much about how this ceasefire is being tested and how fragile it is. Do you think it's actually holding up?
I mean, if holding up means the following. Number one, the large-scale exponential rise of Palestinian deaths in response to large-scale Israeli deployments, artillery strikes, airstrikes. Clearly, the war has changed. You don't have the exponential rise of Palestinian deaths on a daily basis. So it's holding in that respect. Number two, more aid is getting in, but clearly, as the World Food Programme and other NGOs attest, not nearly enough. And finally, and the thing that matters most to the Israelis, other clearly than their security needs, you have all live hostages returned, and I believe now there are only 7. The deceased hostage body was supposed to be returned tonight. I think there are only 7 hostages that remain, bodies, I mean, 5 Israeli nationals and I believe 2 foreign nationals. So in that sense, yeah, the ceasefire is holding. But it's like pedaling a bicycle. I mean to trivialize. If you stop pedaling, you fall. And that is the case here. There has to be movement beyond phase 1 to the additional phases of the Trump peace plan, if in fact we're going to avoid reverting to what we've witnessed over the last 2 years.
Well, talks are continuing on phase 2, and Turkey and several Arab nations are considering contributing to an international force that would help to secure Gaza's borders with Israel and Egypt. Also, they would be looking at protecting civilians and humanitarian corridors, and also training a new Palestinian police force. Do you think a force like that would actually help to bring peace to the Strip, and would Israel accept it?
I think if you actually got both of the combatants, Hamas and the Israelis, to agree to the deployment of an international stabilization force, certainly it would help. You're going to need better governance. You're going to need to begin the painful process, not just of delivering humanitarian assistance as winter approaches, but to contemplate what it's going to cost in terms of time, resources, and effort and organization in order to reconstruct or reconstitute Gaza. But the main problem continues to be the fundamental, I think, irreconcilable objectives of both the current Israeli government and Hamas. The 20-point plan calls for decommissioning, demilitarization of Hamas's weaponry, and clearly the objective here, and that's one that the Americans and the Israelis share, is to make it impossible for Hamas as an organization to have any meaningful role in governing or even in influencing the politics and the security architecture in Gaza. That problem, which has existed now for 2 years, ever since October 7, continues to exist. No contingent, whether it's Arab, Muslim, or European, security forces are going to deploy into an area which is still a free fire zone, in which you have Hamas weaponized and in control of 47% of Gaza, and you have the Israelis willing to preempt the possibility of future strikes by Hamas. You've had two major violations of the ceasefire in terms of attacks by Hamas emerging from tunnels in an area the Israelis now control. In fact, there is an American proposal on the table to find a way to facilitate the transfer of those Palestinian fighters in those tunnels to areas that Hamas controls. The Israelis insist at the same time that there are several Hamas operatives that have been accused of murdering Israelis. They want those people either brought to justice, to surrender, or to be killed. So this is just one sort of glimpse, one window into the complexity of the challenges that remain to bring an end to the war that you and I would consider literally ending the war. We're a long way away from that.
Well, one of the key sticking points, as you mentioned, is that demand from Israel that Hamas disarms. Hamas is adamant that it will not do that. Do you see either side compromising on that issue?
I mean, that's really the key. You know, in Northern Ireland, the decommissioning process took it began in '98 with the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. You don't have anything like that. An agreement to power share. No, I think the major obstacle is Hamas is not going to voluntarily destroy itself. And while I think it's trying to delay the implementation of that second phase, it could perhaps agree to surrender its large-scale weapons, keeping its weapons. But the reality is Hamas remains the most preeminent political and security actor in Gaza. Whether or not you take away its large weapons and even dismantle its tunnel infrastructure, which is half the length of the New York subway system, Hamas is going to remain a political actor. And I think that is one of the major challenges that the Trump plan faces.
Well, let's talk about the scale of rebuilding in the Gaza Strip. 83% of buildings have been destroyed. Talk to us about how big of a challenge reconstruction is going to be.
I mean, the clearing of rubble, 50 million tons of rubble, not to mention the demining process of ordnance that probably is still alive, not to mention how do you fly the airplane and build it at the same time? What do you do with 2 million Gazans who don't have access to potable water, proper sanitation, enough food, shelter, and medical care while this process of rebuilding is launched? And who is going to pay for this? I think the Trump administration's view is that the Gulf Arabs will pay for it, the Emiratis, the Qataris, and the Saudis, but I don't think they're going to pay for it if, in fact, there's no long-term prospect that the conflict between Israel and Hamas won't somehow be ameliorated or ended so they don't pay for reconstruction that is destroyed. And that has been the story, the sad, tragic story of Gaza since at least 2007, when Hamas essentially staged a coup and took over governance of the Strip. So again, it comes down to, I think, a fundamental question: security, governance, better prosperity, and some measure of hope for Palestinians in Gaza depends on how to reconcile what is now irreconcilable. Hamas wants to survive and maintain its influence, perhaps with some of its light weapons. Israel wants to see it ended. And how you bridge that gap right now, I think I don't have an answer, frankly. And I think if the people who did have an answer to that question, we would have seen progress, more progress than we've seen in the last month. It's going to be a very heavy lift to create more security, more prosperity, and good governance in Gaza without somehow reconciling what is now, I'm afraid, irreconcilable.
Well, Aaron, I do want to get your thoughts on this yellow line, this controversial yellow line that Israel has created in the Gaza Strip that cuts Gaza roughly in half. There are fears that Israel could turn that into a permanent border. What do you think their reasoning is in creating this area? And do you think there is a prospect that they could decide to make it a permanent border?
Well, it may become a permanent border if the three questions that we've been discussing is an answer. Number one, who or what is going to govern Gaza? Number two, who or what is going to maintain the security in all of its various dimensions? And again, who or what is going to reconstruct Gaza and make it livable? I think the Israelis, the agreement would not have happened without the Trump administration agreeing to a process of phased withdrawal of the Israeli Defense Forces. If you take a look at the yellow line, it runs the entire length of the Gaza Strip. I was looking at a map today, anywhere from 2 kilometers in the north to 6 kilometers of width in the Rafah area. And I think the Israelis clearly are going to hold on that line until they are persuaded that an international stabilization force can somehow begin to secure the areas from which they've withdrawn. That, again, is a function. I'm afraid everything seems to me to be a derivative of one major problem, and that is the differing end states that both Hamas on one hand, the most significant Palestinian political actor in Gaza, has been since October 7th and remains so to this day, as we begin the 3-year period since the beginning of this war. And Israel's notion, the current Israeli prime minister wants total victory. That means not just the decimation and hollowing out and weakening of Hamas, it means its destruction in the sense that its military organization is dismantled, its top remains of its top leadership seek exile from Gaza somewhere else. And frankly, right now, I don't see any way to resolve that. So short answer to your question is the yellow line, which leaves the Israelis in control of what? 53% of Gaza, with, I suspect, the right, which they will demand to preempt and prevent hostile action coming out of Gaza, means while we're not going to witness, I think the war as we've witnessed it over the last 2 years is over. But that doesn't mean the fighting in Gaza between Israel and Hamas has somehow ended, to the great detriment of 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, civilians who are literally, there's this terrible African proverb, when elephants fight, only the grass dies. And I'm afraid, tragically, sadly, that encapsulates the state and fate of the 2 million Palestinian civilians who have suffered so over the course of the last 2 years. Gaza was no paradise before October 7, to be sure, for any number of reasons. So I think it requires a degree of leadership. And I'm not sure we have that leadership.
Aaron David Miller, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Really great to get your analysis on this. Thank you. Stay with us here on World